Hello friends, I'm really excited to be sharing this video with you today as it's the first in a series of Q&As that I'm going to be doing with various people in the recovery community, all of whom came requested and suggested by your lovely selves. So thank you so much for your input in this series. The general concept of this video series is that I will be asking these individuals the same 3 questions, and I'm really excited to see the variety of responses that come up, the topics that we get to explore together, and I really hope that you find it valuable. So without further ado, let's dive into the first of these Q&As, and this one is with none other than the wonderful Becky Freestone. I really hope that you enjoy it.
Hello, everyone, and I'm absolutely thrilled to be able to say that the first guest on this little video collaboration mini series that I'm doing is the wonderful Becky Freestone. I have a very strong suspicion that pretty much everyone who's watching my videos knows Becky. If you don't, you have to check out her channel. But we are going today to be working through 3 questions, and I think we should dive straight in. And the first one is, what are the 3 most important things that you learnt or did from your recovery?
Good question. First of all, thank you for having me. This question, when you sent these questions prior, so I thought a little bit about it before I hopped on today, and there's so many things. I feel like there's so many things. I feel like those are almost 2 separate questions. Like, what did I do in recovery? And then since recovery, what have I learned about recovery? Does that make sense? But I'm going to focus on what did I ultimately have to do to be able to recover. And the things that came to mind for me were, first, I had to focus on that aspect of freedom, like focusing on and just even envisioning even the small glimmer of hope that I could be free, and focusing on what that life would be like without an eating disorder. And it sort of excited me. And I think up until that point, I didn't really envision or imagine that that was a possibility. And so just having that tiny bit of like, okay, if there is a chance I could do this, I'm going to focus all of my energy on doing everything I can to recover. So I think the first thing would be to just get really clear, really clear on what do I need to do to be able to be free of this, and believe and trust that that is a possibility for me, myself, for anyone who's dealing with an eating disorder. There is absolutely a possibility to fully be free of this. And the only variable in this is you. The only variable whether or not someone's going to recover. I truly believe, regardless of life circumstances, regardless of how long they've had it, regardless if they're severely undernourished or they're close to being fully rehabilitated, and or even fall under what you'd call overweight category. Like, I really believe, regardless of where you're at, if you have any tendency towards disordered eating or eating disorder, you are going to be the determining factor whether or not you recover. And so when I realized, like, oh my gosh, this is on me, I became very focused and very like, okay, what do I need to do? I stopped relying on others as much, and I really just had one eye on the prize. And that for me leads into the second thing, which was I had to stop lying to myself about how much I really wanted to eat and how much I actually, in fact, wanted to rest. And it was an even harder one to admit that I actually really wanted to rest. And when I stopped lying to myself about those 2 things, and a part or a component of that was putting aside what I had been taught in the past about recovery, and most of that would be like under the umbrella of conventional treatment, right? Meal plans, exchanges. I had to like find out for myself through years of crap with an eating disorder to realize that actually those methods do not work for me. And then accept what actually, in fact, I wanted to do all along, which was eat a ton of food and rest. And then not just acknowledge and accept that, but actually act on it. And so the second one would be really diving in, stop underestimating how much this was going to take, how much grit, discipline, sacrifice, right? I had to put recovery first. It had to be my focus. This sounds bad, and I work with a lot of moms, but it actually does have to come before your family. It has to come before your kids and your spouse, because for so long we kind of will use them as sort of a excuse to not be able to do recovery. When in fact, when we do recovery, then we really can fully be there for our family. And so just being able to accept the fact that this is going to take a lot of work, this is going to be really scary, but every minute of my day has to be flipped upside down. Like it has to be completely different from what I've done in the past. Emily, I can't hear you. Can you hear? You can obviously hear me, but I can't hear you. And I don't know if that matters, but I hopefully there we go. Now you're here. Now you're there, which is fine.
Okay, good.
I heard the intro and everything, but since I started talking, I've just been saying you nod your head, but I know that words are coming out of your mouth. So
I think I'm just nodding along in agreement.
okay.
And I think, what's really stood out to me already in what you've been sharing is that need to prioritize, that need to get really self-honest, brutally self-honest, and accepting, and acceptance is such an important word here, that
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the day, it has to come above everything else. And that can be a really challenging thing. That can mean having to put on the sideline or put on a shelf things that are really important to you. But it's remembering that when you put recovery first, you are actually putting all of those other things first as well in the long term.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think with determination, awareness becomes actually quite scary, right? Because you can be aware before you're determined to recover of your disordered stuff you do, right? You can totally be aware of it. A lot of times you're denial, but a lot of stuff you're fully aware of is super disordered. But when you're determined to recover, it kind of changes the lens in which you're looking at that awareness. And it's like, shoot, now I actually have to address this because with all the awareness that comes from kind of reflecting on how's the eating disorder popping up in my everyday life, now there's a project ahead of you. Now their work has been cut out for you. You know exactly what you need to do. And so when I stopped lying to myself and when I stopped underestimating the effort that was going to need to take place, I got very organized and I got very detailed in how I was going to go about my day. And I don't mean writing out what I was going to eat every day the night before. I don't mean that at all. But I got very, maybe disciplined to be a better word. I refused to allow any part of my day to look like any day in my eating disorder. So anything, like even if I was just using the utensils that, I was eating prior to recovery, I just didn't want anything to do with them. Even if I was sitting in the seat that I always said, I don't want to be in that seat. I want to be somewhere else. Even if I was getting up and I don't know, the order in which I was getting ready for the day. Obviously, exercise was something that could not be in that day. And so there are just so many things that I had to be attentive to all day long that my brain, and I've talked about this a lot in my own videos, felt wrung out at the end of every day. Just like mentally was so dang exhausting because you kind of have to be on the ball every second of the day.
Yes.
Every decision you've made prior, yeah, full-time job, absolutely. And every decision you made prior to entering recovery and fully being committed was influenced by your eating disorder. So when you fully commit and you wake up and you're still heavily influenced by that eating disorder, there's obviously going to be a lot of resistance and a lot of decision making of, no, I can't do that. A lot of awareness. Okay, yeah, that's showing up here, that's showing up there. And that's a learning curve. It doesn't happen overnight, but it can happen pretty dang quickly where you can be on board fully in recovery with all those commitments and on your way and really just knowing, okay, it's a matter of time, right? Not fully recovered, obviously, in a week or so, but significantly in a different place mentally and with so much more confidence going on and so much more momentum. So that would be the second thing.
And just to say there, again, what stands out to me here is taking responsibility and taking ownership of your responsibility to pilot this process. And actually, sometimes I think this idea of radically committing to recovery can feel like this super overwhelming thing and this really out of reach thing. But when it comes to eating disorder, it is infiltrating often every single moment and micro moment of your day. And so as bold and as scary as it can seem to kind of even contemplate the idea, especially depending on where people are at in recovery, of radically committing to recovery, it's actually about recognizing there is already radical stuff going on. It's radically heading in the direction that you don't want to be going.
Yeah, absolutely. 100% I agree with that. Sometimes I'll have my clients do these little writing exercises as, they seem applicable and helpful for them in the stage of recovery they're at. And sometimes I will have them write down, instead of writing down all the ways in which your eating disorder is showing up in the day, I'd like you to write down aspects of your day that have not been contaminated by your eating disorder. And more times than not, they actually cannot think of anything, even from like the way in which they go to pick up a child from practice. right? They can't sit in the car for a few minutes and wait for them. They get out and they circle around and even that, right? Even every single thing that is going on is being fueled by the fear that comes from essentially that eating disorder. And so um, it becomes pretty eye-opening, I think, for people to see. And through doing that exercise, they're able to see, holy crap, I am totally underestimating. No wonder from week to week, I don't feel like I'm getting very far. Like tweaking this and tweaking that and cutting down on exercise and adding peace on a Friday night, it's not going to cut it. It's really not. And now we'll go on to the third thing, and it has to do with what you were just talking about, being radical. And I feel like this is a word I've used so many times, but it's essentially being bold. What I learned about being bold was that was my key freedom. As I was more bold, and was what was so interesting. Not only obviously does help with rehabilitation and kind of helping you to overcome these fears, but for me, what I found was magic that happened when I was extremely bold, and how the voice in my head, that eating disorder, whether it was an influence, a voice, a feeling, however that presents for you, it just got quieter. And I felt like I gained this edge on eating disorder. It's almost like, the eating disorder is calling all the shots, and I'm just this little puppet that's following it. And then I started being bold, and I was really challenging that, testing it. I'm just I'm so over this eating disorder, screw you eating disorder, I just need to be done with it. And I was going so what I felt above and beyond even, what I thought I needed to in recovery. And as I did that, my eating disorder just kind of crumbled. It started to come down, and I could see it for what it was, looking down on it, being what have you done in my life? I was able to gain so much clarity and so much peace and just stillness in my mind when I was bold. Now, sometimes I'll have clients do that, Becky, I have no idea what you're talking about. I was bold for an entire day, and I'm actually losing my freaking mind. I don't know how you did that. That was so scary, for worse than I did before, blah, blah, blah. And I said, you have to be more bold. And I go, what? Yeah, you actually need to be more bold. I'm guessing as bold as you thought yesterday was, you're sort of still popping up quite often. You're listening to it. So by bold, I mean literally squashing every way that eating disorder shows up. And when they do that, and again, that takes 110% mental focus every day, they can experience what I talk about.
Yes. So. And I think it's so fascinating how very often when it comes to recovery, the script is all around quietening the eating disorder. But actually, a big part of that is you getting louder, core self getting louder in your self conversation. But most importantly, and I know that we very much both recovered and now coach from this very action oriented place, it's in your actions, it's in what you do. And actually, the more bold you are, actually, yes, eating disorder gets quieter, but a big part of that is that you get louder, your core self gets louder.
Yeah, I love that. Absolutely. I think about a lot of the things that I do in my coaching, I can't help but think about raising kids, and there's so many overlaps, right? So when you ask that first question, or the question I guess you're still answering, what did I learn from recovery? Actually, I learned how to be a better parent. One of the things I experienced recently was I'm trying to get my 4-year-old Hazel to fall asleep in her own bed. Okay, she falls asleep, and this is just me being fully transparent. She usually falls asleep in mine and Zach's bed, and it's just easier. She cuddles with me there. She falls asleep, and then we put her up in her bed before we go to bed. As soon as she's been asleep long enough, and I was okay, this has to stop. She's 4, she's actually developed some good habits of falling asleep in her own bed. So the first night I picked her up, there was about a 45-minute full-blown tantrum, screaming, yelling, I don't want to sleep in your bed, and I was just no, I'm going to be really firm here. I'm not, if I give in now, 20 minutes into this tantrum, who is winning? Who the next night is going to do that exact same thing? My 4-year-old, because she just got what she wanted from that tantrum. And so when we're in recovery, right, and you start throwing a fit, and you're oh my gosh, fine, okay, I'll put my shoes on and run. What do you think is going to happen the next day when you're trying not to run? That eating disorder is going to throw that tantrum because it gets what it wants every single time. So until you're bold and you're this stinks, I don't like laying in my child's bed listening to her kick and scream and throw a giant fit for 45 minutes. I don't like that, but I like it now because she falls asleep in her bed, right? And so it's going to be that same thing in recovery. Yeah, you're going to have to go through some crap. It's going to feel very uncomfortable, but the more you can lay down the law and be this is not happening, the quicker your brain's going to learn, hey, you know what, those thoughts, these eating disorder thoughts that are being generated really are futile. She's not listening. So yeah, that would be my third thing. Be very bold.
Absolutely. You have so much wisdom. I have no doubt at all that each of those things are going to resonate a lot with people who are listening, and also so many practical ways in which you implemented and did those things as well, which at the end of the day is crucial. We can sit and we can talk about recovery. You can talk and listen and watch and learn, but nothing changes until change is made, and that's an action driven thing. So thank you for sharing there and sharing in such an action orientated way. So the second question, it's a bit of a mouthful, but if you had to pick one recovery related topic to do a passion project on, what would it be, and what are the most important things that you'd want somebody to know or hear about that topic?
Yeah. I feel like I'm especially passionate, and this has been after years of coaching too. I feel like I've become even more passionate about it. The importance of rewiring at a higher weight. When you asked that question, I was like 100%. I feel so passionate that that is so under talked about, and that there's just stigma still around eating disorders. Even people with eating disorders who know better, who know they're a person firsthand that's living with an eating disorder that's at a higher weight, still refuse to accept that they need to do what it takes to recover and rewire past that weight that they're at. So I feel extremely passionate about that. I would say probably 90% of my clients are in that boat. Where when I say higher weight, I mean relative to their rock bottom, relative to wherever they were the most severely restricting, maybe the most disordered, right? For whatever reason they think then, okay, if I've done some rehabilitation, if I've gained weight in a disordered way, if I've, fill in the blank, essentially not sitting in the lowest weight I've ever been, then these commitments and these things that are talked about in videos such as mine and yours don't apply. No matter how many times we say it applies to everyone, right? And so how do we go about doing that? I thought about and I always use the analogy of just like how my brain learns and grabs onto concepts. And I was thinking about it'd be similar to let me back up. I feel like the people I work with, and this is why I'm so passionate about it, people that I work with, regardless of what their weight is, BMI is what their weight is, right? Regardless of that, the behaviors are exactly the same. The thought processes that go on, their intentions, the things that are fueling this fear are exactly the same. And for that reason, I feel they need to be treated the same. And we need to trust that our bodies have mechanisms inside them that actually want us to thrive and to allow them to do that. And if we focus on rewiring, that in fact will happen. Will that be your dream body that you thought you always would live in? No. 99.9% of the time, no. But what you'll find is your worry and your desire for that to be so drop off, be something that you just can't even be bothered by anymore because what it took from you, right? It's almost like I kind of shudder at the idea of the number of journals I wrote in that had to do with my weight, body fat percentage. And it's so nauseating to me. It is just something that I really can say with confidence. It's something you won't hold on to and care about as much as you do when you're still very much disordered. And so when all the behaviors are exactly the same, to me, you would treat that package, of disorder essentially in the same way. To me, it would be similar to, and back to this analogy I was going to say, it'd be like, let's say someone has two people come in, they both have the same kind of cancer, the same stage, right? One's got a low BMI, one has a high BMI. The doctor's going to say, okay, the one with the low BMI, we're gonna tackle this thing head on. We're gonna go in first, try to remove the tumor. We're gonna do chemotherapy. We're gonna do everything we can to help you, right, to recover from this cancer. The one with a higher BMI, I don't know. I'm thinking maybe let's see what happens with the tumor, how big it gets. Let's see how much it's starting to impact your life, and they'll give you, I don't know, some medications or something to see what happens. What? What? That just seems so completely erroneous to me. What on earth? How would someone ever? No one would ever do that, right? I hope no one ever would. And to me, it's the same thing. Why on earth would we treat the same symptoms in a different way? And so, yeah, I'm extremely, extremely passionate about that. I so badly wish those people that are listening that are at that place where they feel like I'm not at my lowest, or I've even more so, I hear is I've gained weight in such like a disordered way and no rewiring's taken place. And
Mhm.
I don't feel like I can do that. Like, how am I going to actually recover now? Right. And I think those are the people who have to be the bravest.
Yes.
Those are the people who have to have the most faith
Yes.
in recovery
Yeah.
and have to want it the most, honestly. I really do. I mean, when we're dealing with people who are extremely underweight, we're dealing with other aspects, like other problems where their brain's basically malfunctioning. They're not all there. It's very hard for other reasons to get those people to
Yeah.
eat. But when you're sitting in that boat where your brain is functioning and you actually see what's going on and you're just staying stuck and can't move forward, these are people I just want to shake and be like, I promise you, you will look back and you're like, wow, I can't believe I cared that much about my weight. So
Yes.
that's my passion.
And I imagine that there will be lots of people listening to this who are going to resonate a lot with what you're sharing, because I know from my own contacts and time in this space, that is something that comes up time and time again. And this feeling of losing permission to do recovery work, to eat without restriction, to rest in alignment with what someone's body is asking them to do, essentially to do the work of recovery, that feeling of permission drying up. And I think it's such an important topic, and I'm really pleased that you've brought it up here. And I think it's important that more people are talking about this, and more people are making it known that that permission doesn't dry up. And I think it's so important in terms of the support network and the voices who are sharing in this community, that there is awareness of the fact that so much of that work is done in a place where, from an external perspective, lots of places would say, oh, everything's fine. And obviously there's so much nuance in this conversation with everyone's individual experience with the weight restoration process, with the place that their body goes to inside their eating disorder and to the place that their body wants to be. There's so much to discuss, but I think it's a really important thing that we are opening that conversation in that direction.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to just close that question with, I don't want to minimize the struggle people go through who are sitting in that place. We live in such an, unfortunately, very messed up world. I think we live in such a deeply entrenched culture that is so afraid, fat, and so afraid of being in a heavier body. And we can't change that, unfortunately, right? I mean, we can be the change in that we can be a person, if you happen to be in that size body, who's confident in living their life, right? That would be amazing. But we can't change the world, I guess, one person at a time. But conforming to and staying stuck because of that culture is just giving it more power, right? And so if you can rise above that, again, I validate that struggle, but I think those are the most brave people.
Yes.
I know. Those are the people I admire. If anyone cares at all about my opinion, right? Which, if it's not mine, someone that you respect or look up to or admire, like, wow, just like the most greatest respect for people who are brave enough to rise above that.
Yeah.
To choose to just freaking live their life. Oh, just makes me so excited for those people, and I absolutely love working with them. So, anyways, we can move on.
Yes. Yeah. No, thank you so much. Now, the third and final question is, what's being recovered like? And was the juice worth the squeeze? Which basically by that I'm meaning, was the battle, the fight of recovery worth it to be recovered?
Yes, obviously, I don't know if you've ever talked to anyone who has fully recovered and been like, I don't know, there were some tough days, I don't know if it was worth it. Like, yes, 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 it was definitely worth it. And for me, actually, even more than the freedom that I experienced from day to day, for me, what means even more to me is that my family knows me, like truly knows me. Right. My kids are being raised by Becky, not an eating disorder. My husband is married to Becky, not the eating disorder. And just especially because my kids were younger when I recovered, but especially the way in which it impacted my husband.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the years that he struggled through that with me, and then to be able to cover and like truly give him the gift of just like me, all the good and the bad and everything that came with that is like all he ever wanted was priceless. Right? That I would do it 100 times over again because of what that meant for him. And then I'm lucky enough to reap the rewards of that recovery because now I also obviously get to be free. I wrote down, because when you asked this, I was like, gosh, okay, so yeah, that's the first thing that comes to mind. But then it like started flooding my mind when I started thinking like, well, how in other ways? Because as time goes on, you kind of like, it's not like every day I'm like thinking about all the freedom I have, like, oh my gosh, I'm free. It's like, yeah, for a little while after. And yes, I do coach, so it still brings up things like when I'm talking to people, it reminds me of like, oh my gosh, I do, I feel for that person. I remember feeling that way, like those types of things. But on a day-to-day basis, I'm not like going throughout my entire days going, man, I'm so glad I can sit down right now. So I love the question you asked. And so in addition to being free, it's a vague answer, but in addition to that, I love that I have my own thoughts. I have control over what I do or don't do.
Yeah.
I can relax. I can sleep in. I can bake and cook and actually eat it. I can travel. I can sit on a plane for 10 hours and enjoy it. We're going to Portugal in a couple of weeks and I'm very excited. Whereas before that I wouldn't have gone, but had I gone, I would have had tremendous anxiety about it, right? Now I'm just like, oh my gosh, I'm genuinely so happy about that. Can't wait. I can try new foods. I can belly laugh. I can make others laugh. I can feel excited. I can have strong emotions and they don't kill me. So after you recover, it's not like life's perfect, right? Like I've been through actually some pretty hard things since recovering, and not every day is great either. There's days where I'm feeling kind of depressed or overwhelmed or frustrated or sad or angry or whatever it is, right? But I can feel those things and I live to tell about it, right? They always pass and I can continue living my life without reverting back to old behaviors. I can cry and still be okay. I feel human. I can gain weight and doesn't affect my worth. I can be a role model for my kids. I can feel close to God. That's a huge one for me. Many people who know me well, I'm very religious and I have a very strong relationship with God. And I really lacked that when I was sick. And that was the time I didn't realize how much I was missing out, but I'm so grateful for that. I can help serve others. I can be sad and ask for support. I can be imperfect. That's a huge one, huge thing. I'm sure you learned too from recovery. It's like, I love perfection. It's great. It enables me to be free, right? Like actually, imperfect is, who wants to be friends with a perfect person? No one, right? So I love that I'm imperfect. I can be kind. I can give love. I'm content. I can feel peace. I can now finally feel a difference between quick feel goods and true joy.
Yes.
What you're thinking is happiness when you fit into a pair of jeans, or when someone comments on how fit you are, or the body checks that you might, be like, oh, thank goodness I passed them today. Like, that's not really joy. It's really not. It's just you're like a monkey dangling from like one branch to the other, just wait, it's like waiting to fall. True joy is just being at peace and content with what is. And I love that. And I have control over the way in which I want to live. And that is priceless. So recovery is wonderful. That's why you and I both coach, right?
Yeah.
The hardest thing about recovering is there is one thing I don't like about recovery. And this is something I cannot change. And I'm sure you actually would agree with this. And that is when I see people who are really sick and stuck, and I know what that feels like, because I lived there for so long. I hate that I can't just do it for them. I hate that I can't change it.
Yes.
Not having control over that is hard for
Yes.
me because I feel for them and it just like tugs at my heartstrings, and I try my very best as a coach to get through to them.
Yeah.
But ultimately, at the end of the day, it's up to them. So I hate that I can't control that. And I hate that I have to feel what they feel.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, recovery is wonderful.
Yes, yes. Oh my goodness. I absolutely loved that imagery you had as well for joy versus the experience of the highs or the supposed happiness in an eating disorder of the monkey kind of going through the branches. That's such a powerful visual. And I feel like from my own experience of recovery, I absolutely relate to that, of that constantly just the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. And maybe
hoping you don't fall.
Yeah, and glimmers of kind of relief and like, oh, I've got that, but then it's just gone instantly and it's the next thing and the next, as opposed to that real solid, joyful, peaceful thing that comes when you are deeply, truly free and content. Well, thank you so, so much. I think I could probably just sit and talk. The room will be dark and I'll just be still absolutely engrossed in our conversations.
Thank you so much for having me. It's so good to talk. It's actually very enjoyable. I think I should talk to people more often. Usually I'm just talking to myself on my YouTube channel. It's really nice to engage with someone. So this is great. I should probably do more of that myself.
I want to say as well, on behalf of all of the people that I know who have voiced to me how beneficial your sharing is. And I'm sure very many of my subscribers, just how grateful we are, and I'll use that collective term, for all of the work that you do in putting out things, both in your coaching, but also in the stuff that you put out for free for people to be able to access. You know, it's absolutely, yeah, it's wonderful. And yeah, you're a real role model and a real beacon of hope and joy in this space.
Well, thank you, Emily, so much. And you are doing amazing work yourself. And I love that when someone asks, do you know any other like resources? I'm like, I love that I can trust. I can send people to your channel and your coaching, and so I can have confidence in doing so and not worry, gosh, is she going to trigger them? Does she have okay content? Like I'm so glad we're on very similar pages in regards to how we approach recovery. So thank you.
Yeah, marvelous. Okay. So thank you so much. And
okay.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to sharing this with everyone because I'm sure it's going to be really valuable.
Awesome. Thanks, Emily. Have a good day. Have a good night.
Bye.
Bye.